Hopefully we could talk a little bit about how to recognize when it's time to maybe quit, what you can expect if you're a person in this position, and of course, how to protect yourself. Paper trails, right? How do you walk away without burning a bunch of bridges? I think when you quit a job, one of the most important things of walking out is not trying to burn bridges, because you obviously are the one choosing to leave. If you lose your marbles... What's up, Lil Z?
What's up, Kiana?
It's a big day.
It is a big day.
Tis our last episode. We did it. 13 intense hangouts later.
Give yourself a pat on the back.
Big old pat on the back. We've talked about it all. I'd like to think that we've really done a good job covering all of the key milestones that you have with your boss. And we've saved the best for last. So today, we're talking about quitting.
Yay!
The I can't do this anymore, I'm done, it is you, it's not me.
Right.
Drop the microphone and leave. That is what we're talking about today.
All right.
Quitting is probably, at least in my professional career, one of the fondest memories I have. I think I've done a mix of like polite leaving, rage quitting. I've seen it from various ends. I think today's episode probably will be a little shorter. There's not as much lessons to give, but there are some pretty juicy stories I have. So we'll see.
Okay.
Hopefully we could talk a little bit about how to recognize when it's time to maybe quit, what you can expect if you're a person in this position, and of course, how to protect yourself. Paper trails, right? How do you walk away without burning a bunch of bridges? I think when you quit a job, one of the most important things of walking out is not trying to burn bridges, because you obviously are the one choosing to leave. Mm-hmm. If you lose your marbles during that exit, let's say you say some very hateful things to the company or hateful things to your manager will probably not like you as much anymore. And so you've burned bridges at this point. Now, sometimes the bridge needs to be burned. I'm not going to sit here and say don't ever burn any bridges. Me personally, I think there's a balance. Not every bridge is worth maintaining. But with little experience, you can overthink it. And your first time quitting is definitely scary. So obviously quitting's when you're choosing to leave on your own. It is voluntary, it's empowering, and honestly it just depends on the role you're in, because sometimes it can also be a little messy. Right? If you got a toxic company, it can be a lot. There's a handful of formats of quitting, I'd say, standard ones. Number one, we mentioned this before, but the 2 weeks notice. It's the professional standard. This is in the US, this is the gold bar for how you quit. You provide 2 weeks notice, which basically means you're going to stick around for 2 weeks, help them clean anything up, help them take care of whatever work you had, give them a little time to transition, and ideally you leave on good terms. 2 weeks notice, ideal. But, as we've discussed before, it is employment at will here in the US, so you are not required to give the 2 weeks, right? Then you have a strategic exit. So this can also be with a 2-week notice, but this is when you've lined up your next job, you have a plan of where you're going next, you're able to give thoughtful notice, and you might even get a reference, but you don't necessarily need it anymore because you've got your next job lined up.
Right.
Then it gets a little stickier. Then you have a burnout bailout, which is just you quit, no plan, you can't take it anymore, you're out.
Right.
Then you have the rage quit, the spicier of the quittings. You walk out, same day, middle fingers up, I don't give a shit, I don't care about my recommendation, y'all can get it.
I know. Yeah. I've heard a couple stories from you and my friend.
Right. And your friend. Rage quitting's big. It's also extremely fun to do in the moment, I will say. And then, of course, in the complete opposite fashion, you have quiet quitting. You've mentally checked out. This is like a trend that I've been seeing a little bit more with the recent like a generation and the trends in the workforce, but like quiet quitting is you've mentally checked out for a handful of months. Like you basically already quit in so many ways. You stopped going the extra mile, you stopped giving a shit, you stopped participating, you stopped doing all these things. But now you just like you make it official. So
Right.
you've been quiet quitting for 6 months and now you're like, okay, I'm gonna let you know that you're paying me to do nothing. All of these examples are very fun versions of quitting. I think, obviously, when you rage quit, you're not like, here's my 2 weeks notice, bye, right? Like, that's a flat out the door. And then you have the opposite side where you can be a little bit more peaceful, play the cards right, here's your
Can be
2
me.
weeks notice, let's be friends, let's see what happens. Obviously, everybody wants to leave things professionally, but when you're working at a really toxic company, it
That's
is
hard.
very hard.
Right.
It is
I'm
hard.
making a cake for my 2 weeks
Like,
notice.
right, but you're also not in a super toxic company, in a super toxic
Exactly.
job, and you love
Right.
your coworkers and your manager. So making a cake is a very sweet way to say, here's my 2 weeks, even though you've also told them a million times.
A million times. This is not even a 2 weeks. This is a month-long notice. When I
Yeah.
gave my graduation cards to them,
That was your
they
notice.
already
Like,
knew. That was
currently
my notice.
leaving.
Right. Right.
So you've resigned. What can you expect? Well, it depends on the situation, right? For example, in your position right now, when you give your 2 weeks notice, well, you're a part-time student. So it's very expected of you to leave. They know you're going to college. This is all standard stuff. They might give you, recommendations to work at a store that's near you in the place you're going. But it's going to be pretty simple, right? You're going to give your 2 weeks. They're going to take all of your materials, your badge, things like that. Any keys that you have or any codes that you have will get turned off. In similar fashion to getting fired or being in a layoff, you lose your access, they take all of their stuff back, and you kind of go about your merry way. Now, if you're quitting, let's say, a more corporate role in your professional career, sometimes they're going to counteroffer you, and they might even guilt trip you. I have seen this happen many times. I've also done this, unfortunately, but I was desperate. It is potentially a part of it. Sometimes when you quit, obviously your manager wasn't expecting it perhaps, or they didn't know something was coming and they've been thinking about other things. So they might try to get you to stay and they might offer a counteroffer. We talked about that one guy that used my offer to go get a higher pay at his current job. Right? Who knows? Maybe he tried to quit and then they countered him. That's what I'm going to tell myself.
Definitely not what happened, but we'll go with that one. That was so toxic.
Right.
Like, that's actually crazy. Big, bold moves, man.
Also, the smiley face on the email will haunt me till the day I
Come
die.
on the show.
Right. Should have added them on LinkedIn so that I could ask them.
Right.
But I think, good for him. I'll never hire him again. But talking about burning bridges, a bridge was burned.
Right.
All right? If
Obviously.
you tell me that my offer got you more money at your current role, smiley face.
The way he didn't even need to, hit you back, or, hit you back up. He could have just never answered. But he went the extra mile.
Declined. And gave me
He
information.
just told you everything.
Yeah. Exactly. So, to my point, right, when you quit or when you try to quit, you never exactly know what's going to happen. They might try to counteroffer you, right? They might try to get you to stay and convince you. They also might walk you out of the building in that exact same day. Like, you quit, 5 minutes later, get your stuff, let's go. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes it can happen if you have a super sensitive job. Sometimes, like, if you're an executive, if you're really high up and you have access to a lot of stuff, sometimes, they'll ask you to leave immediately. Or maybe you have bad juju with leadership and your manager, and as soon as you quit, they basically push you out of the door. In any case, it's very potential for that to be a response. You don't necessarily get your same notice, all of these things. Now, of course, you're going to need to return your paperwork, any equipment that you had, any, laptops, things like that. And of course, ideally, you're going to review your final paycheck details and potentially sign exit paperwork, as we've discussed. They're always going to try to give you exit paperwork. You do not necessarily have to sign it, especially if you quit on your own terms. But in a general sense, you do need to return all of your stuff and so forth.
Right.
Then you have exactly. Well, then you have your health benefits, right? So you got to walk through, like, are you going to lose health benefits? If you have your next job lined up, then maybe, you have something coming in for your next role. Depends. Of course, your final paycheck should also include the remainder of your PTO balance. So company paying you out for all the vacation days you've saved. And then, sometimes if you're really leaving on good terms, there's a goodbye party. So I've seen this happen a lot.
That's what we're about to have.
Exactly. That's what when you leave on good terms, you leave on good terms. There's a party. Right. There's a happy hour. I mean, Victor's gone to so many, like, people are leaving happy hours in the past 4 years since we started dating. Like, it is very regular for people in his space to do that. So in a general sense, you can expect a general flow. I think another thing is you're going to have an exit interview. Anytime you leave a company, especially on your own terms, mostly on your own terms, if you quit, there's this thing called an exit interview. Now, an exit interview is very simple. It's exactly what you think it is. HR pulls you to a room, and they basically ask you, why are you leaving, right? What went wrong? What could we have done better? What were the pros of this company? What were the cons of this company? And this may happen before your party, after your party, like all of the things in the sequence I just list. Unfortunately, there isn't exactly a perfect play out of it, because if you get walked out that first day when you quit, things are going to move a lot faster and they're probably going to have a different order. But in a general sense, there's going to be some response from the company, whether it's okay, bye, or please stay. Here's more money. Here's another offer.
Right.
And then there's going to be some form of paperwork formalities where you either review paperwork, sign paperwork, return equipment, right? Get all of your nicks and crannies taken care of, handle any, remaining emails or contacts or outstanding tickets, stuff like that. And then you will either have a party, or if it's not so great, you may not have an exit. You may just talk to coworkers. But in all of these scenarios, somewhere in between all of that, there will be an exit interview. And this is where you can burn bridges. Well, I think rage quitting, they know. Usually when you're walking out, they know why. I think I have seen cases where people rage quit. I've seen it firsthand in adult corporate world. Someone sent a Slack message one time in a group responding to an immediate client thing. And this person just responded and said, I've had enough, guys. I'm done. This is my last day. I'm no longer doing this anymore. And they quit. I saw the Slack messages myself. I was like, wow. Bold. Also, because you could just, edit a Slack message. So I'm like, what if you spelled something wrong and you're just going in there and, quickly changing your message? You'd be kind of crazy. But in that case,
I don't think
right?
He cares. Right.
In that case, that person rage quit, but they also definitely had an exit interview. Right? Because HR shared those notes with me. So I know about it. So I think, you can burn a lot of bridges in your exit interview. I think we're going to quickly slide into the next section here at Boss POV, because I've got a lot of personal stories about this. I have had, I think, a handful of employees quit on me. I've also seen lots of people quit, like been in support, helped them quit, helped them go about it. On average, I would say most people take their exit interviews. They don't say anything. They kind of just leave the company. Because as soon as you start telling the company all of the problems they have, everything that went wrong, all of this stuff, you kind of, I don't know, you get labeled with all that negativity. And in a similar fashion to, like, if you can't say nice things about them, they might not say the nicest things about you.
Right.
So I had one employee once that I worked for years. Like, we collaborated on so much. I honestly thought we were really close. Probably too close, honestly. I was in a very toxic company, so it is what it is. A lot of the habits that I built were via just being in such a toxic, bad environment. And I think in some cases I may have not had the best judgment. And I admitted to that. I apologized to this employee afterwards, for sure. But I'll never forget when they quit. Because it was kind of one of these conversations of like, do you want to work here? This employee had voiced to me before they had basically no passion for what we were doing. And I was like, all right, I completely understand that. With that said, right, they should not have told me that. Because as a manager and as the boss, I desperately appreciate the honesty, but it also is business. So you going to your manager and saying, I don't want to do this and I don't like my job, you kind of put them in a corner. And that's what happened in this case. And so I was like, okay, so are you giving me your notice? Is this your notice that you're quitting? Because that's how I interpreted it. Was like, I don't want to do this job. I'm not interested. Now, I think that I may have misinterpreted this conversation, and that's on me. But it's also on the fact of, like, it should never have gone down the way it did, because it brought to my attention that this person, you know, basically wanted to leave. And I think as much as I worked with this person and tried to find ways to bring their passions into the workplace, or this one specific employee, I was helping them redo their resume to apply for other jobs. That's how much I was helping this person. And that was before we kind of had this, like, conversation, because I told him, like, hey, I want to help you. Like, if you really want to leave the company, then we can create, like, a 6-month plan. I'll help you do all of these little things, like networking, kind of little tier stuff, basically what we talk about on this podcast, right? And then in 6 months, we can do a check-in. Do you still want to work here? Do you not? Right? And at that point, we can decide. And so that's essentially what happened, was, like, at the check-in, they were like, I don't want to work here. And I was like, all right, so is this your notice?
Oh, okay.
Right? And so I think there was obviously a little confusion. This is not your standard situation, I should say. And as I mentioned, like, the environment was very toxic, so it just did not help anything. But I interpreted that as a person quitting, and I kind of started to move things in that direction, like taking them off projects, taking them off these things that they didn't have any business doing. And then when they did their exit interview, they blasted me. Like, absolutely blasted me, to the point where HR sent me an email with all of the written feedback. And keep in mind, you know, my boss was a psychopath or a sociopath. So there were also probably some hyperbole to this, and the way they dramatized it, let's say. Because I read the feedback. Was it great? No. But was it, like, not that crazy? Yeah, of course. Because certain things in there, as I mentioned, like, I shared too much about mental health with this person, and they didn't like that. Totally reasonable point of feedback, right? But the way that they put all of this stuff on blast mode in their exit interview definitely burned a bridge. Now, obviously, later on, I apologize, and all things are good between me and this old employee now, but the trust will never be returned, right? Like, that bridge is gone.
Right.
I would never hire them again.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think, and this is someone I genuinely, like, respect and I like and really got along with, but after that experience where they kind of just shit on me during their exit and made it seem like I was the whole reason they were leaving, which, I mean, fine, so be it. After everything I've done for them, I understand that, I wasn't amazing. But like I said, burnt bridge. That's one example. Now, I've also had an employee quit on me during the worst time, like busiest time of the year. And I can admit, like, I totally mishandled that situation. It was beginning of my management career, but this person basically just quit because more or less they were up for an annual review. They switched teams. Long story short is I couldn't effectively give a full review. And so I kind of was like, if you want a raise, if you want more money, you just need to tell me what you want and then we can negotiate it versus me like proactively having this whole system with you just because like I couldn't accurately do it. Learn my lesson hardcore this time because this person was a mega star. They did not like the way that I treated that case and they went and found another job somewhere else and they're crushing it still. So obviously when they quit, it was on good terms. They gave me the 2-week notice. Everything was great. I tried to convince them a little bit. Like I kind of was like, oh, this isn't great news. Right. I'm kind of shit out of luck for the rest of the year, but I completely understand, like, appreciate the notice. Please let me know if you have any references that could potentially do this job because it was very hard to fill. And when they did their exit interview, they kept it very simple, very high level. They kind of just said the basic stuff and they walked out. So no burnt bridges there, still talk to this day. No trust lost in this experience. Like I can fully admit that I mishandled it and I should have done more. But it still stung, right? The quitting was hard. I don't think they knew exactly how to go about it. I've had people quit in crazy ways. Like I said about the Slack message, see people just do it this way. Me personally, the few times I've quit, one time it was an internship, but my manager didn't quite, let's say, keep the end date. So usually when you have an internship, there's kind of like a set time frame. Starts June 1st, ends August 15th. Like that's usually how it works. It's like from when school ends to when school starts. And sometimes you apply for internships during the school year and they'll be like just the first semester or just the second semester. And so this was one of those jobs I applied to where it was just the first semester of the school year. But my manager at the time, it was just me and the founders of the company. And I was like a sophomore in college. And I just remember the like end time came and my job was not done. There was no formal exit. Like it just kept going. And the founders were talking to me about things we were going to be doing next year. And I was like, oh God, I was really hoping, like I thought taking a position where there wasn't an end date, or there was a specific end date, sorry. I thought taking that position would make it a lot, because I wouldn't have to quit. There's no awkward goodbyes, right? Like my previous internship, there were no awkward goodbyes. In this case, I'm like, oh shit, what do I do? Like, this was supposed to end last month. You keep sending me stuff. I don't know how to kind of be coy about, hey, like, weren't we supposed to wrap this shit up about 6 months ago? Like, I didn't know what to do. And I remember that was like such a crazy situation for me because I was just like, I don't know how to quit. And then, like, fortunately, that was when Mom had her surgery.
Oh, right.
And so the Whipple.
Oh.
And so that's because she had that Whipple surgery, I was able to use that as the reason I couldn't work for this company anymore. Because I was just like, hey, I got to go home and take care of my mom. And I like just don't have time to do all of these things for you anymore. Like, I can't do this. And we left on great terms. Obviously, it was a company size of 2 and 2.5, including me. So there was no exit interview. there was no conversation afterwards. I mean, like, I haven't talked to these owners in a while, but like we're always got along great. But in a general sense, right? Like, very awkward situation, didn't exactly know how to handle it. And at the end of the day, that's going to happen when you quit sometimes. It's part of the mechanisms. Like, you don't want to upset people. And sometimes you might find out that you're going to quit right before the worst possible time of the year. for that company, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, it is not your responsibility to worry about it. It's their responsibility to worry about it. And so that was another thing I learned. Now, one time I rage quit, walked out
At the
in the
hotel?
middle of my shift at the hotel. Yup.
Here we go.
Yeah, I know, right? So the person that I have beef with from back in the day at this hotel, let's give them the name Flower. Okay? Flower, this coworker of mine that created hell for me. Like every day I would come in and I'd have so many guests complaining about this person. I'd deal with so many extra things because they couldn't get it done on their shift. And apparently this person was super experienced in the hotel industry and being a front desk girl. And so supposedly they should have been better. Anyways, I remember I was sitting at the laptop on the front desk. I'm just, typing my little shit. Back then I used to like do homework in between checking guests in. Like I would just be on the laptop. And I was looking at the home screen and I just see this like document called Flower. And I'm like, what's this document called Flower? Let me click on it. And I click on it and it's her fucking pay stub. And what do I find out? I find out she's making more than all of us. Whoosh. I was pissed. Now, at the time, I was only an individual contributor. I had never been a manager before. I had never hired people. So there was a little bit of naiveness going into this rage quitting. But when I saw that, oh my God, I saw black. I was like, no way. And keep in mind, all of this is quite literally over, I think, like $1.50. But that's not the point. The point was, every time I came into this frickin' workplace, I had so many messes and so much stuff to clean up because of Flower. And so I found this out. I called my best friend that worked at this place because I was like, this is nuts. You will never believe this. She makes more than us. And then I basically was so mad. I walked back. I went up to I think it was HR at the time. I don't even remember. Whoever was back there. And I was like, I quit. I found her pay stub. She's literally being paid more than us. I think what I did was I had went to HR and I kind of was like, I just found Flower's pay stub. And not only is she making more than us, but she's kind of this mega pain in my ass.
Right.
And I think they said some like generic thing like, oh, well, she's more experienced. She's all these things, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, all right, well, if that's how you guys handle business, then I'm done here. And I was like, I quit. And I just walked out. Now, this is the best part. The girl that was on shift with me running the front desk, I left. I drove off. I'm probably like 2 minutes away. She calls my cell. Kiana, come back. I just walked out too. And then my mega asshole manager, Jeff, had to go back and work the whole shift by himself. And honestly, I don't feel bad about it. I have no regrets.
I got like a really aggressive comment, I guess you can say, a couple days ago. One of my managers, like, we were talking about me leaving. Obviously, that man wants me to leave the most out of everybody. But anyways, we were talking about it, and it was so passive-aggressive to me. He was like, oh, did you get your raise? I said, raise? No, I didn't get a raise. He goes, oh, well, that's awkward. And then just continues on. So I guess everybody else got a raise but me. And I've been there longer than most of the people who are working there.
Ouch! No, they didn't, little T. And they snitched on themselves. That was super intentional. Yeah. See, those are like the corporate politics things that they just... That
was mega intentional. Because I was minding my own business. I was stocking them shelves, and then he just came out and just... So when you leave, transfer-wise, did you talk to my store manager, and she can write you a whatever recommendation, and your raise can also transfer. And he's like, oh yeah, did you get your raise? No, I didn't get a raise. He goes, oh, well, usually she'll pull you in the back and tell you. Everybody got a raise but me.
Maybe your next shift. I don't know, little T. Unfortunately, the thing is they know you're leaving, so there's quite literally no reason
I
to give you a
know.
raise.
I know. I'm just because I told her that, you know, when I transfer, like if I do end up transferring, like I want to keep working at Bath and Body Works. Like I like working there. It's easy job.
Yeah.
Bigger stores make it easier, but yeah, I mean, if my raise could transfer, why not just give it to me?
Yeah.
I'm just
No,
gonna
that
grow up
makes
and die,
sense.
I guess. Yeah, that was really passive, really aggressive for no reason.
What a
Really hurt
dick
my
move.
feelings. Huh?
Yeah. Fair enough.
And
Well,
Jerry gets raises all the time.
yeah. Well, but that's like, I think they knew you were going to quit, so in this case, it's hard to be like, well, they should have just given it anyway. Like, that would have been the nice thing to do. That would have been the good Samaritan thing to do, but who knows? Maybe your store supervisor means business, all right?
I guess.
Those seasonal sales are taking out any chance of you getting your extra 50 cents, sis.
Jerry's getting paid more just to be a regular cook than the car hops and the managers combined, pretty much. He gets paid more than the managers do as a
Oh.
cook
Oh.
because he kept threatening to leave, and they
But
keep giving him raises.
okay, so here we go. This is where we get at, right?
Yeah,
I'm trying to
when
quit.
he does it, he doesn't do it to get the raise. He just says it, and then they'll next say, "Oh, we added, you know, $1 more to your."
Wow. Okay, so to my point, right? That's a potential outcome. It's like you really want to quit and then they come back to you with something else and now everything changes, right? Because all of a sudden there's more money on the table, like maybe that was the issue with the job. And I think in a general sense, like your boss probably doesn't expect you to quit. Most of the time when people quit, I would say, not all the time, but most of the time, there is a small element of surprise. Not saying it's huge, right? With all of the employees that I had that quit, there was an element of me that knew this will happen. And good managers also know that good people leave. That's just a
Right.
part of their growth. They cannot stay forever. So you have to accept that to some degree, right? It shouldn't be this like, oh my God, I never saw this coming in a million years. Now, it is a bit of a shock still, being the manager who's been quit on multiple times. There is this element where you're like, damn. It's like, I knew it wasn't great. I knew something could have happened. Today's that day. I did not know today was going to be that day. And that's where the shock comes
Right.
from. I think a lot of times too, you know, your manager sits there and they're like, oh shit, what am I going to do? I don't have this person. Who's going to do these shifts or who's going to do this project that I'm working on? Like there's an element of like just who's going to cover this work. But that is not your responsibility. So if you're thinking about quitting and your mind goes to, well, who's going to do what I do when I'm gone? You are doing the job of your manager, and you should not be worried about that because that's not your responsibility. All right.
Right.
So, boss POV in general, like quitting, being quit on, I should say, mega sucks.
Right.
It's also expected, though. The best employees are always going to leave and find something better. No matter how loyal you think somebody is. Remember that friend I told you about that said they're always for sale?
Right. Think that mentality.
Think about that mentality, right? And I think there's some
Yeah.
degree where every company should think like that. That's why there's so much of an importance on company culture, on how you manage your employees, like how you treat your employees. There's a lot of pressure on those elements because when you have really good, talented people, if you treat them like shit, they will eventually leave. And if you want to have a successful business, you got to keep them. I forgot what it was. I think there's a statistic that says, I can't remember. It's like if an employee quits or you fire an employee, the cost to replace that employee is, I think it's like half their salary or like their salary and a half. Like it costs more than just keeping the person.
Yeah.
So you end up paying double, essentially, just to backfill one position, and that's why retention is key in the workforce. So, mentality checks. Number 1, I have to have my next job lined up before I quit.
No.
Now, this is something I think with older generations, it's a stronger mentality. With the younger Gen Zers, it's not as strong. There's definitely less of a misconception here. But in a general sense, if you tell people you want to quit a job, somebody is going to ask you, oh, what are you going to do next? That is always going to be the question. And for some people, when you need money and you have kids and you need that financial kind of stability,
Right.
when you quit a job, it is a very scary thing to even think about. How am I going to pay to feed all these people and to do all of this stuff? In general, though, it's wrong to think that you have to have something lined up, because it's really just fear talking and it's not strategy, right?
Yeah.
It can be more damaging to stay at a bad company, in a bad role, in a bad environment, than it is to leave and take a huge leap of faith. I've seen this multiple times where I've had employees from toxic companies I've worked at in the past where they stayed longer because everything else was okay, right? Like the money was decent, like they wanted the stability, but they're in this really toxic environment. So guess what? They do not have mental capacity or bandwidth to look for jobs. Looking for a new job, applying for jobs, interviewing for jobs, all of that is a lot of work.
Yeah.
It can be hard for somebody to balance doing that just with a normal, stable job, let alone a toxic, potentially you're on burnout, you're overworked, you can't even see straight. I remember for me, when I was in, let's say, toxic environments at toxic companies, I couldn't even fathom applying for other jobs. Like, I remember one time I got super pissed at leadership and I paid some person on Fiverr like $200 to redo my resume, because that was my way of like sticking it to them without anybody even noting I did this. Because it just made me feel prepared. But like when you're in that space, you're not even updating your resume. Like you're not thinking about these future planning things. So the task of getting this next job can seem so daunting and so much work that you just don't do it.
Right.
But there are so many detriments to your mental health, your physical health, and of course your career that you do when you're in these positions. So another example, I had an ex-colleague who didn't want to quit, right? Moved around the company a bunch, kept trying to find a less toxic spot to be in. But it's a toxic company, so the work was dumb. A lot of the stuff, like they wasted a lot of time on things coming from leadership that didn't benefit anyone, right? And then what happens? Well, they end up getting fired or they quit. I think they quit, yeah. In this case, they quit. They had a new job. They go to this new job. They don't know how to do shit. Because for 2 years, they didn't learn anything because they were at this toxic company that didn't care about advancing them in their career, that didn't care about the meaningful work that they were doing, and just had them doing mundane things for 2 years. So when they went back into trying to find a job, all of a sudden, they're not a competitive applicant anymore.
Right.
Those are the detriments of staying. And sometimes, as scary as it may seem, you have to take a leap.
Right.
Not everyone can be as fortunate, but it's important to remember, like, my best friend quit knowing they didn't have a job up next. Quit knowing that they were going to have to work 10 times as hard eventually. But they had to quit because when we were trying to find them a job while they were working at a bad company, it was impossible. They couldn't lock in. They couldn't care about it, right? There was too much other stuff going on to focus their attention. Even when there would be interviews and like good potential jobs incoming, it would just turn into nothing because his heart wasn't in it. And he wasn't present for it. And so the right way you need to think about it is if you've planned ahead or you've hit a breaking point, you are allowed to bet on yourself. You are allowed to take a leap of faith. I know many people who the thought of quitting their job without something lined up next will keep them up at night. That is a terrifying thought. And I feel for that, right? That's why we're going to do episodes eventually on financial literacy, Because if your finances are in check, you don't have as much of this grip, right? I had a friend that left Google and went and worked for a small company. I think they lasted 3 months, not even. Then they realized their manager was a micromanager, kind of crazy, backstabby, all the bad things, right? And they walked away, no problem. Like, the leadership was like, do you want this other job? Like, the job of your manager? Because we'll fire them. And they're like, no, I don't need it. Because they had plenty of money, right? Because they saved and they, they used the resources from those previous roles. So I completely understand that some people may not be fortunate enough to do this. I think the thing you have to remind yourself is when you stay in those spaces for an extended period of time, it does do damage to your psyche, to your physical being. And there are unforeseen costs that you're not even thinking about staying at a dull job. These dead end roles where you're not growing, where you're not progressing, like, it is going to affect you much larger than just getting this paycheck. So how do we take action here? Well, we build a budget. A budget and a bit of a buffer savings so that you can start to have somewhat of an exit timeline, right? So they say it's best to have like 6 months worth of expenses saved at any given time. That's like the goal amount in a savings account for people to have. If you have 6 months saved at any given time, right, then when you make one of these leaps, it's not as scary because you have 6 months until you really need to start worrying about it. My bestie that quit, when he wanted to quit, I talked about this, right? Bonuses were coming up, and I was like, you cannot quit until you are paid your bonus, because that's going to go towards your 6 months.
Oh, yeah. I remember, yeah.
Another thing is you want to start networking before you resign. I understand if you're in a bad space, it's going to be really hard to turn on the charm and do extra. Sometimes people quit and they take 6 months of doing nothing because they just need to heal their brain because they're so burnt out. It's possible that's you. In this case, go slow. Reach out to an old colleague here and there. Don't make it this huge pressure thing. Make it more about just like reconnecting with people that you know from your past, because a lot of the times the way you're going to get your next job is just based on who you know, right?
Yeah.
My bestie, his next job, it's probably going to happen because of a golf game that I had.
Yeah.
Right? So who you know, it's important. And then I think it's just know when enough is enough, right? When your health is tanking, when you're starting to feel... I had a friend, an old colleague, that quit because their blood pressure, they went to the doctor and their blood pressure for 2 appointments in a row was higher than standard. And they're like, there's not any amount of like Cheerios or healthy food. Like, you need to get out of that stressful environment because it's quite literally impacting your heart.
Yeah.
So, another misconception. You have to give 2 weeks notice or you're unprofessional. Now, if you do not give 2 weeks notice, it is seen as less professional. That is true. But this mentality is wrong because 2 weeks is truly a courtesy. There's no legal requirements in the US to do this. Like, there might be something in your contract, so double check, because then there is legal requirements for it. Or like if you're in another country, other countries have more requirements. But in some situations, like a really toxic space or, your health is at risk, walking out is probably going to be the smarter move. So the right way to think about this is you need to notice it's ideal to preserve your relationships, keep your safety, and honestly, you don't want to burn any bridges. So that's where the 2 weeks is a nice thing. You avoid burning bridges. But your boundaries have to come first. If a company took advantage of you, went past your boundaries or any of these things, you don't owe them anything. Right?
Yeah.
My bestie didn't give 2 weeks notice because it didn't work out for him. And then they renegotiated new terms that did end up being more than a 2 week notice, but it was built in a way that it worked for them because they had travel coming up. There's a lot of ways to go about it, right? If you try not to leave on bad terms, if you're trying to exit professionally and on somewhat, saving the relationships and phase, you'll work with your employer and you'll see what's possible. Now, I think, how do we take action here? Well, if you're going to leave fast, like this is a rage quit, I got to get out of here, right? Keep it short and firm. When you send out that email, when you send out that Slack message, however you deliver this news, effective immediately, I'm resigning due to personal reasons. Personal reasons is a wonderful blanket term for anything and everything without having to explain yourself. And keep in mind, you do not have to explain why you are leaving. Maybe that should have been a misconception, because I think some people think they need to justify it and they need to justify their choices, but you don't. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to give the 2 weeks. It is employment at will. Just like if they fired you, they wouldn't give you necessarily all the information you need. They're not going to give you this whole explanation of why you suck. Like, no. Right?
You didn't think, yeah.
I think just remember that if you do without notice, or even if you do give notice, some companies still might just walk you out. You might not get through those 2 weeks, right? So don't over romanticize your like one-sided relationship with your manager and anyone else. And then of course, just remind yourself, would your employer return the same courtesy? Probably not. Right? So, red flags. Obviously, at this point, if you're quitting, red flags don't really matter in the sense of like, you've probably seen all the red flags. You've probably gotten a big chunk of it. So if you see, it's why you're quitting. So if you see red flags at this stage, just look at it as I did the right thing. This is positive reinforcement that you made the right call. And I think the other thing too is when your other colleagues quit, they're going to tell you stories of how that was handled. And so if you're hearing some of these red flags from your colleagues, just take note. Remember, right? Number one, I already talked about this. They try to guilt you into staying. Now, for example, with the employee that quit on me, I didn't guilt them hard. I completely understood it. I was like, is there anything I can do to change your mind? They said no. I said, cool. Got it. Message received. I'll move on. I didn't sit there whining and begging them. But it does happen. That emotional manipulation is not a retention strategy, and they really just want your labor to keep their peace. Not your peace, but their peace. Another one is they make it personal. Now, I've seen this happen before. I have never done this, but I have seen it happen where, like, people quit, and then all of a sudden the manager is really cold to them, or petty, or passive-aggressive. Maybe they make sassy comments, like, about a raise, right? Maybe they have a little bit of a disdain for you. They give you dirty looks. I don't know. In any case, if they start making it personal, it's a red flag, because this is business. Just like they wouldn't want you to take, getting laid off personally, the quitting thing, it shouldn't be a personal thing from your manager, right? Some managers truly look at it as like, oh my God, you're leaving me and you're putting me in such a horrible position. And it's like, honey, that's why you make more money than me. Deal with it.
Exactly. Figure it out. It's your job.
Now, we've talked about this before, but in general, if you ever have any pressure to sign exit documents, it is just a red flag. If there is ever pressure and maybe they're rushing you, maybe they're making you, maybe they want you to sign NDAs, non-compete, separation agreements without, giving you proper time to review any of these things. It's just suspicious, right? Yeah. Taking a standard week, couple days to review documents is normal. It's totally within your realm of like, ask for it, expect it. You are entitled to it. If something else happens, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Now, I've mentioned before how, I guess, sometimes they're going to walk you out immediately, right? They're going to shut everything off. Now, if you quit, you give 2-week notice, and instead they're like, no, we're cutting everything off today, bye. It's a little bit of a red flag because it just shows they don't trust you. Right? They never trusted you. They didn't want you there either. I think I've never personally done this or seen this, but in some cases, if this does happen, it's just not the standard, let's say.
Right.
Okay, major red flag is if they refuse to pay you your final paycheck or any of your earned PTO. Now, this is beyond your standard red flag because now we're breaking the law and whatnot. But I don't think this will happen. But if this happens to any regard, like they delay your payment, they push it, they do any of this, a big red flag. Usually it's a legal requirement in most states. If they're delaying it, sometimes it's a power move, right? Sometimes they're just trying to keep you on your toes. Just watch out for that. Now, a big one is they trash talk you after you leave. Now, obviously, this is also the case for if you get fired, but there are laws after you've been fired where companies are not supposed to be talking about you here in the U.S. They're like not allowed to say certain things. If they say certain things, you can go, take action against them. But more of the story is if they're, huh?
Sorry, I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, well, how would you know if they're talking bad about you? But I guess
Oh,
coworkers and-
I received full recordings of company videos
Oh.
after I
Oh.
left to listen to how they described our departure.
Oh.
Like quotes, like people. Remember how I told you that comment of them saying these one guys of like, Kiana's a bad collaborator and that's why it didn't work out.
Oh, right.
They made that comment to the whole company, and then the whole company was like, Kiana, you'll never believe this. I got like a Snapchat video of just them saying it, It's like,
Bruh.
because your old coworkers, a lot of times they are going to care about you. I think the other thing to remember is if you work at a company and they're trash talking any employee, red flag.
Right.
If they will talk bad about anyone, they will talk bad about you.
Talk bad about you. Oh, 100%. Oh, yeah.
Okay. And a lot of times if you quit, they might try to lie and make it seem like you were the problem and, they're going to try to warp situations. Everybody wants to come out on top. So keep that in mind, okay? Trash talking, gossiping, it's not for the workplace. If they're doing it, it's a red flag.
Right.
Okay, now I mentioned the guilt tripping. Another potential response is they bribe you. Now, this is not necessarily a red flag. It's pretty standard, right? Like when my employees quit on me, I was like, is there anything I can do to convince you to stay? AKA, can I give you more money, more benefits, more whatever it is to get you to stay, right? But what we're talking about is when it's really intentional to where, for example, Jerry trying to quit every single day as a cook. Right?
Right.
Every single day as a cook. And instead of fixing the real issues, the reason he wants to quit, they just keep tacking on another buck, another 50 cents. They're just going to keep going because they don't want to deal with the actual problems. It's less a red flag from like, I don't know, it's not illegal, right? This is a very standard response. But the reason it's concerning is it just shows you like they don't care about fixing the workplace. They just want you to do the job and keep going. And if that's the space that you're in, then that kind of mentality, it's like fire. It goes everywhere.
Yeah.
And then, as I mentioned, they act shocked, even if you've brought stuff up before. And this is where I'm saying, obviously, there is always an element of shock because I didn't know it was going to happen today. That's standard. But when they are acting like, I had no idea you had issues, they're just gaslighting you. Truly. My bestie, when they quit, swear to God, this was the response. I'm shocked. Why didn't you tell us there were problems? Why didn't you tell us that we needed to do things? Why weren't you communicating how you felt? My friend, I did communicate. I literally, for over a year, regularly communicated all of the issues I had with this company.
Yeah.
Right? And they're so shocked. So that's just a red flag because it just shows they didn't listen to you the first time. They're never going to listen to you either. And when you're exiting and you give your exit interview, they're also not going to listen to that. So don't waste your time telling them how to make their company better and burning bridges. Just get out of there.
Yeah.
You're dodging a bullet. So, to recap this, quitting isn't giving up. It's leveling up. All right? You're reclaiming time, sanity, self-worth, happiness, air, everything. Okay?
Right.
You are back to putting yourself first. Sometimes it's going to be because you have a better job lined up. Obviously, that's what we all want. But it also could be just because you've reached your breaking point and you got to protect yourself. In either case, walking away on your own terms the way you determined it, right, is one of the more liberating and exciting things you will do in your career, right? It might be a little scary because you don't know what's going to come next sometimes, but you're betting on yourself. So if you are currently debating quitting, or you're halfway through your resignation email, this episode's your sign. You don't owe anyone anything in that workplace, okay? You don't need to prove that you're a team player. You've done enough. Throw that email into ChatGPT and hit send, all right?
All right.
And with that, little T, season 1 is a wrap.
We did it.
We've talked about a lot of stuff this season, right? A lot of critical moments. We've done, honestly, in my opinion, I feel like we've covered everything because we kicked it off with interviews, and then now we just did our fun little separation series of quitting, layoffs, getting fired. It's done. The relationship's over. On to the next one, right? You know that saying, like, in dating, the best way to get over something is to get under something new. Obviously, don't sleep with your manager, but in a similar fashion, the best way to move on from a really, really horrible, toxic work experience is to find the next one that's better. Yeah. Now, you might have a bad picker. You might gravitate towards toxic companies, right? I've learned this. My hypothesis, which hopefully one day I'll have a scientist on here to talk about this, but my hypothesis is that people who grow up in toxic homes and are surrounded by chaos as a child often find themselves in chaotic, toxic work environments as an adult. Because you think it's normal, you think this is what you're supposed to be doing. That was me, obviously. That's how I ended up in my toxic situation. And I think this season, the whole idea is to start unpacking what you should be looking for. How can you know those red flags? If you have a bad picker, go to the website, download the red flags cheat sheets, and start looking for them at work, okay? Play bingo.
Oh, yeah. We should make a bingo chart with red flags.
We definitely. I'm actually, as I'm saying it, I'm like, we're making a bingo chart of toxic company stuff. That is 100% started.
And then when you leave, you can just hand them the bingo card of all their red flags. Say,
like if you,
this
like
is,
if you
this
clear
is not
the
my
board,
2 weeks.
You
bingo.
have like, what do you call
you're like
it?
At your desk, and you're just yelling all, bingo! And then you just leave.
Honestly,
go ahead and get up out of there.
Maybe we should monetize and make the bingo thing a real game, and we can like have people play it at work.
I'm here for it.
In any case, if this episode or any of season 1 hit home, please subscribe, rate, and send it to a friend. Right? Maybe the friend who's one passive-aggressive Slack away from logging out forever. Okay? And if you have a good quitting story, please don't forget to share it with us. Send it in. Go to our website. Okay? We're looking for the juicy tea. We will keep you anonymized. Don't fret. And I think I'll leave you with this. Season 1 was all about getting the building tools. I think, Lil T, you are more competent when it comes to workplace politics and mannerisms than anybody your age, I would argue to say. And that is what season 1 is for. Confidence starts with competence. And so I want to make sure, at least early on in my career, I did not know what the red flags were, so I turned a lot of blind eyes. A lot of blind eyes. And hopefully, this season's given you the tools. You can start pointing out those red flags. And more importantly, next season, when we start having guests, and it's not just me talking this whole time, I apologize to everybody for that, and there are other people talking, we will get right into the meat of it. You will already know what we're talking about. You're already going to have a really strong understanding of this space. So, until next time, keep your receipts, paper trails, trust your gut, and walk out with your head high. It's a pleasure, y'all.
Bingo.
Peace and love.
Peace and love.